Hi, I'm Apothecary Mary, and today we are going to be foraging evergreen conifers. Evergreen meaning they're green all year round, and conifers meaning cone bearing. So today we're actually going to be foraging trees that grow naturally near me in the inland Northwest, but you can find these in the States and Canada as well. Before we begin, I am not a medical professional and I don't diagnose or prescribe. I usually suggest that you use at least 3 different resources to make sure that you have the correct plant. I'll link some resources down below, and if you're pregnant, it is advised that you avoid consuming pine needles as well. Stick around for the end of the video so you can see several of the recipes that we're going to make with the evergreen conifers, including items that you can give away for Christmas. So when we forage evergreen conifers, you always want to take a little bit from each tree, and you don't want to take from the topmost of the tree or from the very final sides of the tree. So first, we need to find the tree. This is a white fir, and one of the identifying characteristics of a white fir is the pine cones, when they fall off the tree, they actually break apart. So you'll find underneath the snow, you'll find bits of scales of pine cones, fir cones. So we're actually going to look at a smaller fir tree because this one is so giant it's hard to show all the different characteristics. But another identifying characteristic of a fir tree is that pine cones actually stand upright, whereas most other trees that have cones, their cones go downwards. So fir always has pine cones that stand upright, and then as they fall off the tree, they break apart in little bits of scales. So all the trees that we're talking about today, they do produce some sort of resin. And now this works as a band-aid for the tree. It's antimicrobial, it's anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and it's helping to actually seal the tree and protect it from the elements. So we're not going to take too much of it, but all those amazing properties we want to harvest and use as well. So you can see that there are drips coming off of the tree, and we're going to just take the extra right there. So we're not going to, in harvesting this, we're not going to harm the tree at all. It's still protecting itself, but we get to enjoy the little extra bits that it has to offer. And we're going to use this to make an amazing, nourishing lotion bar and chapstick as well. Okay, so we're going to talk about, that actually has more snow on it than this one. We'll talk about this pine tree. Shake it off so we can see. When we think of Christmas trees, we often think of pine trees, but mostly pine trees aren't the best Christmas tree option because they have these really pokey needles that grow in bundles of 2 to 5. You see how that attaches? That would attach there to the branch. And their needles are sparser, and their branches create sort of a strange tiered canopy look. So if you're wanting a beautiful conical shaped Christmas tree, you're gonna look elsewhere. But pine needles are an amazing source of vitamin C and vitamin A. They're also full of antioxidants and phytonutrients, and they really help your body fight against viruses and inflammation. Pine trees also have 2 types of cones, the pollen producing cone and then the seed cone as well. It's kind of like Narnia. This here is the white fir, and you can see its branches outreaching, and it's pretty overall conical shape. If you look underneath a white fir branch, you can see where it gets its name. It has these white stripes on the underneath side of the needle. White firs have pine cones that reach upwards towards the sky, and right now it's already lost its cones, so bits of the cone you can find underneath the tree. And I really love cooking with white fir. It has a lemon tangerine taste, and it just reminds me of being out in the forest. The white fir needles also lay flat, and they don't bush out like spruce or Douglas fir trees. It's a nice, fine, flat layer. And here we have Douglas fir. It's often called red fir, but it's actually not a fir at all. It's more closely related to a tamarack, but it keeps its needles throughout the year. And as you can see, its branches reach upwards unless it's compacted by snow, and they're bendy and they'll compress down as well. And they're Their needles lay kind of like a bottle brush, but it's not as pokey as spruce. It's definitely gentle and soft. And one of the identifying characteristics of the Douglas fir is its cones. The cones actually stay on the tree throughout the year, and this one is too young to have any of its cones showing. Many indigenous cultures have legends about the Douglas fir cone, but one of the more common ones is that there were mice during a great fire, and they were looking for a place of refuge, and the Douglas fir opened its pine cones to let the mice come in. So if you actually look at the cone of a Douglas fir, you can see little mouse tails sticking out of the Douglas fir. Here is an adult Douglas fir, and as you can see, the little mouse tails are sticking out. The mouse decided to stay. Besides the redwood, the Douglas fir actually grows to be one of the tallest trees in the United States. It's actually a great option for a Christmas tree as well because it keeps its needles on longer. So again, when we're foraging the tree, we don't want to take from the top of the tree, and we don't want to take the terminal ends of the tree. We're going to reach in here and grab a couple branches from right here. This is white fir, one of my favorites to forage and add to things. It adds a really fun touch to chocolate truffles, which is included in the PDF printable that's available to buy. And let's see. We're just gonna take a little bit. We don't need too much. And we're gonna let that dry. So there's that beautiful white fir underneath. So for our first recipe, we're going to make a cocoa butter and coconut oil 2-ingredient massage bar. And we're going to infuse it with our Douglas fir. So I brought some Douglas fir in. It's now dry. And what we're going to do is we're just gonna leave it on the stem, and we're just gonna chop it a little bit, bruise it a little bit so it gets that flavor and aroma out. You can use a knife or you can use scissors, that works as well. We're just gonna chop it into our container, and then we will strain it out when we get ready to pour it into our molds. And I thought it would be really fun because of the Christmas season to use a Christmas tree mold. We'll put all of this in here, and we're gonna put it on low heat while we make a couple other recipes, and then we'll pour out and strain out the needles. So we have 1 cup of coconut oil, and we're gonna do 2 cups of cocoa butter wafers. I buy my cocoa butter wafers from either Azure Standard or Mountain Rose Herbs. And as it melts, it's gonna go down a little bit, so we might have to add this at the end here. Push it down. There we go. So we're gonna simmer this on low for about 20 minutes. For our next recipe, we are going to make a white fir infused sea salt. We're gathering all the needles off of the stem. It's a great addition to poultry, to fish, to any roasted vegetables. It's actually really fun to make a potato salad with white fir infused salt. And it's a really easy recipe, but definitely looks and tastes gourmet. And it smells amazing. It smells so good. So we're gonna chop this up really fine. You can also use a spice grinder if you have one, or a coffee grinder, but your next cup of coffee is going to taste like the forest. We're using a different cutting board because this little one is moving around too much. The nice thing about also making this is you can put it in pretty little jars, and it lasts for 6 months to a year. I like to use sea salt, but you can use any of your favorite salts. Just gonna chop, 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 chop. I wish that there was like a scratch and sniff button so that you could smell this. It smells amazing. Okay, we're getting it to a pretty good chop here. And this is fresh, it's not dried. You don't need to dry it when you make this recipe. I am using a Celtic sea salt. You can use whatever sea salt you would like. This one is a little bit dense, but I think it really adds to the flavor. So we're just gonna do sort of a layer effect. So we're gonna put a scoop in our little jar. These are 4-ounce ball jars that I thought would be perfect for this activity. And then we're gonna sprinkle in a little bit of the Douglas fir. Then we're gonna do another scoop. Sprinkle in a bit of the Douglas fir, just like that. Another scoop. Okay. Another thing that I love to do with white fir and some of the other needles is I love to add it to chocolate truffles. It's a really fun treat and it tastes like walking through a chocolate forest. Okay, so we're gonna put the lid on and shake it up. It looks really pretty as it is now. We'll shake it up and tap it down just a couple times and add a little bit more in there. Another sprinkle of white fir, and then a spoonful of salt. This would look really pretty with a white and red twine wrapped around it. I have some of that I'm gonna put on it, or a red little velvet ribbon. For our next recipe, we're going to make an amazing, wonderful, nourishing chapstick. We're using the pine resin that we foraged today. There's about a tablespoon of the little pine resin tears, and we're going to add a tablespoon of beeswax. And then next we're gonna do 2 tablespoons of oil. You can use avocado oil, you can use olive oil, you can also use sweet almond oil, and you can use a combination of both. I like to buy my carrier oils from Mountain Rose Herbs and my beeswax pastilles. I love the ease of using these without having to actually grate down beeswax. So to melt this down, we are going to use a double boiler. We're gonna put this in a little bit of warm water and it's gonna melt on the inside. You can also microwave it. It's not something I usually recommend, but if you want more of a kid-friendly activity, you microwave it for about 30 seconds, stir it, microwave another 30 seconds, stir it. You just don't wanna over microwave it. We're gonna set it right here in our pot and we're gonna put it on low. Now our cocoa butter has infused with the Douglas fir and the coconut oil and the cocoa butter have melted. So we are going to strain out the fir needles. So the Douglas fir has infused it with a little bit of a forest smell, and the cocoa butter is just rich and kind of white chocolatey smelling. We're gonna pour it into our molds. I got these molds at TJ Maxx, but you can find them on Amazon and I will link them down below. These are really fun because when they dry, they're gonna be just a really cute gift. You're welcome to add essential oils, probably 10 to 30 drops would be a good amount. You can also use a tiny one if you want just little gifts to give to people. If you don't have a silicone mold, that's okay. You can use parchment paper and put it in a loaf pan and then use a knife to cut through the bar after it's solidified. But these are great if you just wrap them in bags or put a couple of them in a jar or put one of these bigger ones in a tin to give to your relatives who would like some soft skin during the winter. Cocoa butter is known to be really nourishing, and it really protects the skin against the winter elements. And then we're just adding the antibacterial, antimicrobial, antifungal properties of the Douglas fir and the smell too. So we are going to strain out the little pine bark bits. A little bit of an acrobatic trying to get it into that jar. There we go, perfect. And then we're gonna pour into each of these chapstick molds. Just go slow and steady. It smells amazing. You're also welcome to put essential oil in these as well. If you get it on the outside, it's okay. You can wipe it off. You just don't want to waste this amazing stuff. If you have a bunch of extra wax that just dries on the inside, you can heat that back up and you probably have enough to finish another chapstick. So as it sets, it starts to solidify and it's going to become more opaque. And you want to let them set for a little bit. These usually need to take 10 to 20 minutes, whereas the lotion bars need to take 20 to 60 minutes to set and be completely firm. But then they're ready for use or for gift giving. Thank you again for joining me on a beautiful foraging foray into our backyard, the forest, and learning to forage different evergreen conifers. We had a wonderful time making a white fir infused sea salt, a healing resin balm chapstick, and a Douglas fir infused lotion bar. If you like teas, herbs, foraging, and being out in nature, then this is the place for you. I'm Apothecary Mary. Cheers.